2 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health. In accordance with our routine motion, I'm informing the committee that all remote participants have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. Pursuant to an order of reference adopted by the House of Commons on Wednesday, May 29, 2024, the committee is resuming its clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-368, an act to amend the Food and Drugs Act, Natural Health Products. I'd like to welcome our witnesses who are available as experts for any questions related to the legislation that members may have. From the Department of Health, David Lee, Chief Regulatory Officer, Health Products and Food Branch, and Kim Goddard, Director General, Health Product Compliance Directorate. As a reminder, I'd like to provide members of the committee with some instructions and a few comments on how the committee will continue the clause-by-clause consideration of Bill 368. Colleagues, I read this at the outset of the last meeting. I don't think you need it again. I think we're all clear on what the process should be. I recognize Mr. Naqvi and then Mr. Julian.
Mr. Chair, I
ahead,
indicated
Mr.
half an hour before the meeting.
Point of order.
I wanted to be first on the list.
I have a point of order from Ms. Goodrich.
Unless I'm incorrect, I believe that Dr. Ellis had the floor when we suspended the meeting, and therefore he should still have the floor.
We adjourn the meeting. We start anew. Mr. Naqvi, go ahead.
Chair, I would like to make a motion, put forward a motion that pursuant to Standing Order 97.1, the committee requests an extension of 30 sitting days to consider Bill C-368, an act to amend the Food and Drugs Act, Natural Health Products, referred to the committee on Wednesday, May 29, 2024, to give the bill the consideration it requires, and the chair present this request to the House. I believe my office has forwarded this motion to the clerk in both English and French so that it could be distributed to the members as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Naqvi.
Mr. Chair, I would like the documents to be distributed in paper version. When we receive the document in print version, we can continue discussions.
We will suspend to provide a paper copy of the motion to all parties, and then we have Mr. Julian and Dr. Ellis.
I was actually first on the list, Mr. Chair, and I'm quite aghast that you would not respect that.
The meeting is suspended. back to order. The motion has been circulated. It is in order. The debate is on the motion. Mr. Julian, please.
Mr. Chair, you will not do that again, please. When the clerk prepares a list, you have to go by the order in which it is entrusted. I find it deplorable that you basically shifted a list that had been prepared half an hour before the meeting. I'm going to vote against this motion for an extension. As you know, Mr. Chair, on Monday I served notice that I'll be withdrawing NDP 1 and intend to withdraw NDP 2 in favor of the block's amendments to this bill. I have two things to say. First off, that the filibuster and the games that we've seen both from Conservatives and Liberals around this bill, I think have been very counterproductive on consideration of the legislation. We've had filibusters from the Conservatives now for a couple of weeks on a variety of things, trying to block consideration of the bill. Now we have the Liberals trying to block consideration of the bill. I believe the bill can and should be adopted today with the amendments that make sense and improve the legislation. And Mr. Theriault has offered a couple of paths of solutions, and I support those. And I've indicated last Monday, after consultations with the Canadian Health Food Association, that I would be supporting Mr. Theriault's amendments. So I believe we need to move to clause by clause. We need to complete consideration of the bill, make those improvements that are necessary so that the bill will also pass through the House of Commons. My final point is this, Mr. Chair. I have circulated a notice of motion, as you know, that states responds to the concerns within the natural health product industry regarding the lack of consultation when it comes to regulatory changes, including Health Canada having to justify measures with a clear rationale, provide evidence to justify these measures, examine whether defining therapeutic product is the best language, and ensuring that Health Canada conduct authentically representative consultations with stakeholders in the industry, and that this be reported to the House. To make it clear and transparent with all members of this committee, I intend to move that motion only once we have considered and completed clause-by-clause consideration of the bill. This bill should be completed today. I would hope that both Conservatives and Liberals would end the games that they've been playing around this bill, that we can improve the bill because it does require improvement, and that we can move forward then to other items on our agenda in the coming weeks within the Health Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Julian. Dr. Ellis.
Thanks very much, Chair. And, you know, as you might say in politics, wow, that was a bit rich, given the fact that Mr. Julian's original motion, NDP 1, was the wrecking motion for this wrecking amendment for this bill. Everybody around this table knows it. And what Mr. Julian should be doing is saying thank you to the Conservative team who saved his bacon, considering the fact that if we would not have talked at the last meeting, he would not have had the ability to consult with the stakeholders, which he clearly failed to do previously, and understand that his amendment wrecked this bill totally and absolutely. And now, very sadly, he's trying to turn the table. Let's just call this what it is. Absolutely ridiculous political theater from somebody who made a giant mistake and refuses to admit it. Now, that would be the appropriate thing to do, is to say your wrecking amendment, NDP 1, would have wrecked the bill. And you're sorry for that. And thank you, Conservative team, once again for saving my bacon. But will you do that? No. You're going to get on your soapbox and say that you now are the savior of the natural health products industry. This is insanity. We have been here fighting this since the last time that your coalition with the Liberals allowed the omnibus bill to pass that created this mess in the first place. So if you would have stood up in the original instance, none of this would have happened.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Sad state of
Dr.
affairs.
Mr.
Point of order.
Julian,
Yeah,
please.
thanks, Mr. Chair. Dr. Ellis again seems to forget that he has to direct his comments through you.
That's a A fair point, Dr. Ellis.
But he didn't challenge the truth.
I will take that point,
It
Chair,
drags
you are
down
correct.
decorum when you attack someone directly. It's way better when you do it through the chair.
I don't know about that, Chair, but you know what? I think the point has been made here of exactly what has happened, that that member of the NDP, that person down there at the end of the table, who decided to team up with the Liberals to attempt to wreck this bill, Chair, is unacceptable. It was unacceptable on behalf of the thousands of stakeholders from whom we received emails Tuesday evening. Thousands. And I know why that member changed his mind, Chair, through you. I know why he changed his mind, because he too received those same emails. Anyway, that being said, I would like to seek unanimous consent to pass Mr. Theriault's two amendments to this bill and move forward.
We're on a motion.
I know, but it's interesting.
We have a motion in front of us, but you can do anything by unanimous consent. Can you repeat exactly, Dr. Ellis, what it is you're seeking unanimous consent of the committee to do?
Chair, I would like to seek unanimous consent to pass the two block motions, amendments to this bill, and then accept this bill as is and return it back to the House of Commons with our work completed.
Okay. You've heard the terms of the request for unanimous consent. Is it the will of the committee to adopt the two block amendments and report the bill back to the House? This is not for debate. This is a yes or no.
Non, mais juste question de rappel à l'ordre ou au règlement.
Point of order. I have three.
Did you mean all three?
Yes. I meant 30.
Adopt the block amendments and report the bill back to the House with those amendments. Is there any objection to that?
Yes.
There is objection to that. We're back on the motion presented by Mr. Naqvi, and next on the list is Mr. Calkins.
Well, thank you, Chair, and I want to thank my colleague, Dr. Ellis, for his accurate assessment. I find it. I wish I could say I found it passing strange, Mr. Chair, but I've been in this place for a long time, as have you, and as has the member for the New Democratic Party. But I don't, I guess I shouldn't be surprised at this point by anything at all. You would think, Mr. Chair, that for a member of a political party that found itself in a situation where it accepted carte blanche everything that the minority government was going to do would be a little more gracious when offered a path to redemption on the issue of being able to rescind the clauses in Bill C-47 that Bill C-368 seeks to do. You would think that a member for the NDP would be gracious in accepting a path to redemption for having his proposed amendment to this bill, which would have changed this bill in its entirety. Instead of accusing people of filibustering, he would have been gracious and said, thank you for buying me the time for me to figure out that I was once again wrong, as I would argue, Mr. Chair, often is. And I appreciate the fact that he is now going to need unanimous consent, I believe, Mr. Chair, in order to withdraw his amendment. And I'm just musing publicly, Mr. Chair, whether or not I should be as gracious as he has been to me in giving him that, or whether I should actually say no and make him vote against his own amendment. That would be the fun thing to do, Mr. Chair, but I'll be the bigger person in this, and I will, hopefully we get to the point where we can withdraw NDP 1 and do the right thing on behalf of the industry that relies on getting this legislation and regulations right, and the 80% of Canadians who rely on natural health products So I will enjoy taking the higher road. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins. Monsieur Thériault, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. So we are now discussing Mr. Nafki's motion, and I find it really disappointing that the Liberals are tabling such an amendment. We will not be here discussing C-368 if the government had been transparent from the beginning, if they had not hidden 347 in an omnibus bill, a mammoth bill, without demonstrating themselves as partners of the industry. That's not how we obtain what we want in politics. We are here because we have tried to undermine the industry. Whereas there was a will, the desire was to tighten the rules, the legislative framework, to make sure that the bad players, the rotten apples, were eliminated from the industry, all pay for their bad reputation or any actions that do not meet industry standards. For that reason, we must act correctly. Mr. Chair, you would remember that we were obliged to invite the minister at some point with Health Canada to come and explain to us what was happening with the regulations. It was not even a study. It was a request that was made, and they came to provide explanations. And we realized that with the regulatory framework they wanted and with the recovery costs involved, it was completely inappropriate because they were transferring the pharmaceutical model to the natural products product. Whether the Liberals like it or not, it is necessary, this bill. The foundation of C-368 is necessary to create another legislative and regulatory environment for natural health products. That is what we are trying to do here in committee, and that is what my amendments are seeking to do. A balance between the interest of an industry that we do not want to destroy because of a few bad players, because here we are talking about small and medium-sized enterprises and not major industries. And we have simply tried to transfer pharmaceutical product models to natural health products. This is incoherent. We have been a good player because in the amendments I've proposed, we have heard people saying, be careful, we are not going to question the basics of C-368, but you are violating the order that provided for the disposal of nicotine-based products that are not covered by a proper framework because of the bad work that was done by Health Canada. There's a void, there's a vacuum that exists. They want that we shouldn't do that because we'll be allowing them to do whatever they want. And these people came to warn us of the negative impact of C-368, and that is what we did. We have prepared an amendment, and I would like to correct that amendment once again today, because there are people who believe that we must establish a distinction between nicotine-based products that replace nicotine and tomatoes, cauliflower, aubergines. Mr. Chair, we received tons and tons of emails telling us to be careful because all these contained nicotine. Fruits and vegetables contain nicotine. I will have to eat 10 kilograms of aubergine to have the equivalent of the nicotine I have in a cigarette. But out of a desire to give voice to everyone, that is why we came up with this amendment to say that the legislator, so that the legislature's intention is not poorly perceived. So what we want to do here today is to listen to what we have been told by industry. Industry said we have a reputation to preserve, and we respect our reputation. Conversely, it's not true that there should be fines for costing $5 million, as is the case for the pharmaceutical industry. It makes no sense. Hence, the third amendment that we have tabled that will provide for discussions to come up with a regulatory framework to guide, to present appropriate fines. With the amendments we're bringing to Bill C-368, that is what the government had to do, bring people around the table to discuss instead of trying to hide things in omnibus bills. That's not how we do politics. And then now they come today with a motion claiming that C-368 should simply be amended as they claim, and that it would be adopted in the House of Commons. This is delay tactics. That's not what we want. Now, to end up with a bill which will not be adopted in the House if we go on this way. For those reasons, I agree with Mr. Ellis. If the Liberals have good faith, if they really listen to the people who came to see us here, if they also listened to the turpitudes of Health Canada, when people come and say that they have evidence that they are relying on totally biased methodology, 88% of an industry with more than 900 factories are not standard, and say things like that, it's an aberration. They will not pass the basic course in methodology in the university. I'm not here to waste my time. I'm here to find points of convergence, to find a balance so that everyone should benefit. Consumers must regain trust and continue to trust natural health products. It's not by imposing on them a pharmaceutical model that we will get to that. And for those reasons, I hope that I have convinced my colleagues on the other side that we must go ahead today to continue consideration of Bill C-368. And if I am allowed to do so after this intervention, I will be asking for an adjournment of this motion.
Debate is a dilatory motion. It is not debatable. All those in favor that the debate now be adjourned. Hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those opposed? Very good. Okay, the motion is carried. The debate is adjourned, and no, we're going to do clause by clause now, but I think Mr. Julian has no. Okay, so we're back to clause number 1.
Yeah.
So the chair calls clause number 1, and when we adjourned last week, we were at NDP number 1, and Mr. Julian wishes
Thank you,
to speak to
Mr.
that.
Chair. I withdraw NDP 1.
A motion to withdraw an amendment requires unanimous consent. Is it the will of the committee to withdraw NDP 1? No. It is not. The only way to get rid of NDP 1 is to bring it to a vote and defeat it. Is there any further submissions with respect to Mr. Julian, please?
Mr. Chair, I've worked on a lot of committees over the years. I have never seen a member actually deny unanimous consent, because part of the committee process is to be able to amend and at times withdraw amendments that are put forward. This is the first time in 20 years that I've seen this kind of tactic. It's unfortunate. I will be voting against this amendment in favor of BQ2. I notified committee on Monday, last Monday, about this, and I'm quite frankly surprised and very disappointed that any member would deny unanimous consent to withdrawal, because in all of the legislation I've done over the years, that's never happened.
Ms. Goodridge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's really a frustrating space that we're in, and I appreciate the fact that we're trying to get rid of this wrecking amendment. I know my office had thousands of emails that came in. We had our phone ringing off the hook of Canadians that were worried about losing their natural health supplements. And one of the more interesting ones is I actually had a woman write to me, and she said, this is so problematic, and it would shut down businesses like mine. This is a big reason why I took a step back in my herbal business. And then she goes on to share, this also greatly affects Indigenous medicine keepers and their ability to use our inherent right to medicine. This came from a very proud Métis woman. And I think that this goes to show how problematic this bill was. And so I'm happy that my colleague from the NDP has finally come to see that the amendment he put forward was going to ruin the bill and was going to return us back to the space that the Liberals so carelessly brought us into when they decided to completely wreck this industry without so much as consulting with the industry or any kind of stakeholders on this. But what can we expect? This is a government that thinks that they are above any set of rules. They have no capacity to manage their own time or space. They see everything out of control, and it's evident here in this committee, even in the fact that the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Health tried to extend the deadline on this because he is so afraid of Canadians getting to have the right to their supplements. We, on this side of the House, very clearly, and on this side of the table, believe that Canadians have the right to make those choices, and Canadians that choose to use natural health products should be allowed to continue making those choices. And the bill brought forward, the very common sense bill from my colleague, Mr. Calkins, absolutely will do a good thing in bringing back that space of freedom and hopefully allowing women like the one I heard from who said that they took a step back in their business because of that bill. The omnibus bill that didn't have any conversation, didn't have any actual oversight, and they did it intentionally to be away from any scrutiny. I am happy that we might be able to get to a space where we can reverse the damage these Liberals have done. Thank you.
Sidhu on NDP 1.
Just, Mr. Chair, I want to make a point clear on Ms. Godrej's point. It's just a case if it's bill not finished today. That is why Mr. Naqvi want extension. If we didn't finish today, we can go as fast as we can. But if by chance, if not by class, we can then we don't have a situation where the bill is referred back to the House unamended. That's why, Mr. Yasser, that we want to make clear that point. Thank you.
Any further interventions with respect to NDP 1? Seeing none, are we ready for the question? Yes. Shall NDP 1 carry? A recorded division has been requested. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Henley.
Yes.
Madame Kayabaga. Mr. Naqvi.
Yes.
Mr. Polonsky.
Yes.
Ms. Sidhu.
Yes.
Mr. Calkins.
No.
Mr. Ellis.
No.
Ms. Goodrich.
No.
Mr. Moore.
No.
Mr. Thériault.
Non.
Mr. Julian.
No. Contre.
Yes, 5, nays 6.
NDP 1 is therefore negatived. That brings us to BQ 1. And before I call on Mr. Theriault, I just want to remind members of the committee that BQ1 is something that was proposed since our last meeting, so I want you to be clear that BQ1, that Mr. Theriault, I anticipate, is about to move, has the identifier on it of 134542222, just so that we know that we're talking about the same thing. So, Mr. 134542222, and it says on the top of it, I believe, Nouveau BQ1. That is what is next. Should Mr. Theriault choose to move it, je donne la parole à Mr. Theriault, s'il veut.
Mr. Theriault, you have the floor if you want to present this. Thank you, Chair. To be quick, the only natural health products that will be covered by the meaning of therapeutic products will be natural health products which contain nicotine and used in nicotine replacement therapy. It's similar to what we did, but it clarifies the intention of the legislator. People were worried that chamomile may contain nicotine, as they claimed, and that this is a danger we are placing in the market. This is something we've never seen. We've never seen these. Health Canada has never had to put any warnings on fruits and vegetables. So we're just making sure that everybody can support this bill. And because of that, we made that amendment. It's very clear. Therapeutic products are drugs or devices, any combination of drugs and devices or natural health products that contain nicotine and used in nicotine replacement therapy. Thank you, Mr. Theriault.
BQ1 is now before us. I must advise the committee that if this amendment is adopted, CPC1 cannot be moved due to a line conflict. Just so you know. So I recognize Mr. Calkins next on BQ1.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank the mover of the amendment for bringing it forward. I just want to say on the record and repeat what I said when I appeared before the committee as the sponsor of the bill, that my preference would be that this particular item be dealt with separately and this product be dealt with under different laws and regulations. However, given the fact that I don't think at least this side of the table can be confident that the government side of the table would know how to do that appropriately either. This seems to be the most reasonable solution. Therefore, Mr. Chair, it is with not regret, but with frustration, I think that we will be voting in favor of this amendment because the government has simply not figured out the difference between health products and things that are not natural health products, and we have no reason to believe that they ever will. So, like I said, it would be my preference not to handle it this way, but because this issue does, I believe, need to be handled in some manner, it is a reluctant vote of approval for this amendment from myself as the sponsor of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Calkins. Mr. Naqvi, please.
Thanks, Chair, and I appreciate Mr. Theriault's amendment. I would like to move a sub-amendment to that particular amendment, and it reads as follows, that Bill C-368 in Clause 1 be amended by replacing lines 7 to 11 on page with the following. Therapeutic product means A, a drug or device, B, any combination of drugs and devices, or C, a natural health product within the meaning of the Natural Health Products Regulations that contains nicotine or its salts. Produits thérapeutiques. I believe the clerk have probably received this sub-amendment, both English and French, that could be circulated to the members, that we can then have a conversation. And perhaps, Chair, I can present my comments on this, or we can wait until it's circulated before I'm in your hands.
I would encourage you to go ahead and offer your comments, I expect that members by now or very shortly will have an electronic version. Mais je comprends, Monsieur Thériault, vous voulez.
I understand, Mr. Thériault. Do you want a paper version? No, that would not be necessary. What I understand is that he wants to change the "and" for "or." I don't think that should be the case. We should leave it as is. And Chair, I did not realize that you preferred sub-amendments to amendments. I did not think that at this point, in clause by clause, we could propose sub-amendments to an amendment. I thought we had to withdraw an amendment instead of propose a sub-amendment. No, it's not necessary.
To suspend, everybody has it electronically. You want to speak to it, you go right ahead. I see Ms. Goodridge had her hand up, is that right? Yeah. Okay, so Mr. Naqvi, Ms. Goodridge, go ahead.
Great, thank you very much, Chair. And I think Mr. Thériault and other members will see that this doesn't take away from the amendment that he's proposed, but in fact it strengthens it. It makes it even more encapsulating to exactly what he's trying to accomplish. This change is needed to ensure that the amendment is adequately defined to encapsulate all relevant nicotine-containing natural health products, including that contains nicotine salts as well, which is important. And I wouldn't actually won't mind asking the experts as well why reference to nicotine salts is important. Additionally, also by relying on a specific type of therapy like the nicotine replacement therapy, this may open opportunities for tobacco companies to modify the indications of their product to bypass certain measures. So this sub-amendment corrects that and makes sure that it's, again, more encapsulating in terms of capturing exactly what Mr. Thériault is trying to accomplish. But the addition of the salts part to nicotine is important. And if, again, Chair, if it's appropriate for me to ask our experts right now as to why that is important, I can do that right now or at a later point for the benefit of all committee members.
No, it's appropriate for you to do that while you have the floor, so
Thank you. So if I can ask Mr. Lee, Ms. Godard, first of all, thank you for being here. I know you've been very patiently been at this committee, and I'm glad that we're going through the amendments. Can you please explain why specifically referencing nicotine salts in this bill is important? Thank you.
Chair, our understanding in the formulation is that this is to preserve the youth protection measures associated now with nicotine. If it just says nicotine, it means nicotine-free base. There are other forms of nicotine that can be made. So we just want to prevent the argument that they don't fall under the youth protections just because of a different chemical presentation. So this is just really to make sure it's very, very clear and the youth protections apply. That's its technical operation.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Anything further, Mr. Naqvi?
That's great. Thank you.
Ms. Goodridge, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify a little bit further. That was my question. In reading through this, I've very quickly been able to find that nicotine salts are often used in vaping. It's unfortunate that the Parliamentary Secretary for the Minister of Health could not have provided us with his sub-amendments in advance because he very clearly had them, because that would have allowed us to save some time and not possibly move through this unamended, but how could we expect the Liberals to be prepared for a meeting? So I will leave it at that.
Dr. Ellis, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. You know, I guess I'll echo some of those comments. The reason that we're actually watering down Bill 368 by these amendments is the fact that we learned here in committee very clearly that the current administration, the NDP Liberal government, is unable or unwilling to amend the TVPA, the Tobacco and Vaping Products Act. And I think it's a shame that we have to water down a bill based upon the fact that the minister, who we've had here at committee before, doesn't have a clue on how to amend the TVPA. And we heard that from witnesses. We heard them say that this bill needs to be amended because it would take too long for the NDP Liberal government to figure out how to amend the TVPA. That's the job of being a parliamentarian. However, that's obviously lost on the current federal Minister of Health, who is unable to do that, clearly unable to do his job. So therefore, we're left with disappointing those stakeholders and those thousands and thousands of Canadians that I know Mr. Theriault referred to, from whom he received emails, as did we on this side of the House, to say watering down this bill is not a great idea, and that they are very concerned about their access and very concerned about the collapse of the Canadian natural health product industry, as we heard from multiple testimonies. So I'll leave it at that, but thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Are there any further interventions with respect to the sub-amendment? Mr. Theriault, s'il vous plaît.
Bon. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, what I thought at the beginning was that we're simply changing "and" for all. But what we're doing now is adding "and its salts." That's what I understand. I don't have the document before me. So this is how it's going to read: natural health products within the meaning of the Act that contain nicotine or its salts used for nicotine replacement therapy. Is that what we're talking about?
Donc, ça prendrait l'amendement. OK. Donc, où c'est celle fera en sorte qu'on n'a pas besoin du reste de la...
And it's salts, so we don't need the rest of the sentence, the last part of the sentence.
Qui est proposé?
That is the proposal. Is that what Mr. Lee said?
Donc, on pourrait...
So we could avoid or leave aside the rest of the sentence and simply cover the intention. That will cover the intention.
The inclusion of "and its salts" modifies nicotine because nicotine can be in different forms, so it just gets the whole set of nicotine. The rest of the phrase "in nicotine replacement therapy" is a different issue. That's what it's used for. The caution there was just that there could be language that companies introduce to say, you know, it's just for temporary stopping, so it doesn't fall within the measures. So, I mean, we would give this a broad interpretation, faithfully, to say, you know, it doesn't include, as you say, trace amounts in vegetables and so on. We understand the function of that. But the "and its salts" goes to basically the idea of nicotine, so they can't get around the youth protection. Just make sure that any way you make it chemically, it's included.
Oui, excusez du délai, mais il y a une traduction, là.
I'm sorry, I was listening to the interpretation. And if we maintain it, and is used in nicotine replacement therapy, what does it change if we kept that part of the phrase?
It would add clarity that it is not, as you say, trace amounts in different, because there can be the occurrence of nicotine in things that are not purposely made for smoking cessation. So it basically would add that clarity. It also, we would need to interpret it very broadly so that, again, small language changes so that it's, you know, basically still a replacement therapy in spirit. We would need to interpret that, but I think we could.
J'ai pas Excusez, là, c'est peut-être un effet de l'interprétation, mais
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
j'ai pas compris.
I didn't quite understand what Mr. Lee just said. Well, I'm not the only one.
Est-ce qu'on pourrait être plus clair que...
Could we be clearer without wasting a lot of time on the amendment? Because I would like to introduce the idea of or its salts, but I would still like us to talk about nicotine replacement therapy, because that was what we found in the departmental order that was presented to us here. That is why I prefer we maintain that part of the phrase.
Any,
On accepterait ça.
Will the others accept? So we can move faster?
well, we can't sub-amend a sub-amendment, so if it's not satisfactory in the form that it's been presented, the only option is to defeat it and to introduce new wording. But si j'ai bien compris, Monsieur Thériault,
If I understood Mr. Thériault well, he wants more clarity before he makes a decision.
I think Ms. Goodrich wants the floor. Go ahead, Ms. Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to seek unanimous consent to move the following sub-amendment, that Bill C-368 in Clause 1 be amended by replacing lines 7 to 11 on page 1 with the following. Therapeutic product means A, a drug or device, B, any combination of drug or device, or C, a natural health product within the meaning of the Natural Health Products Regulation that contain nicotine, comma, or its salts, and is used in nicotine replacement therapy.
Do we have unanimous consent to adopt that sub-amendment?
C'est ce que je propose, moi aussi.
That is what I was also proposing.
We do? Okay, and online, agreement all around? All right, so the sub-amendment is therefore adopted by unanimous consent. That brings us to the amendment as amended. So the amendment as amended, then the impact of what we just did was to add the words, was to include salt. Is there any debate on the amendment as amended? Seeing none, shall BQ1 as amended carry? It is carried. So BQ1 as amended is carried. Therefore, CPC1 cannot be moved. So that then brings us to Clause 1. That was the only amendment on Clause 1. So is there any debate on Clause 1 as amended? Seeing none, shall Clause 1 as amended carry? It is carried. That brings us to Clause 2, and we have an amendment on Clause 2. Sorry, that brings us to new Clause 1.1. New Clause 1.1, we have an amendment on an amendement BQ2.
We have an amendment BQ2 proposed by Mr. Thériault.
Amendement BQ2, Mr. Thériault.
Mr. Thériault, could you present that amendment? BQ2. This allows the right of recall by the minister. The industry said there was no problem at that level, that only bad actors had a problem with that, and Health Canada said there were very few bad apples who were not collaborating. Therefore, because of the practice, recalls were based on a voluntary basis, and there was no problem. However, we heard that they had their reputation to protect, and they wanted to ensure that the bad actors be penalized. So that is why I am bringing forward this element to help maintain current regulations while reestablishing some clauses of the law when it comes to food and drugs. So I'll read 1.1. The Act is amended by adding the following after Section 2.2. Despite the definition therapeutic product in Section 2, Sections 21.3 to 21.303, and the regulations made under paragraphs 30.12, F01, and F02. That's what will follow in BQ3, and that amend the fines applied to a natural health product within the meaning of the Natural Health Products Regulations. Therefore, as I said, the right of recall by the minister is guaranteed. They were asking whether there was any serious risk of harm to health. This is implied at Section 21.3. So what minister will not want this if there is no doubt that there's any danger to health? So this takes nothing away from the bill, because it clearly says that looking at natural health products regulations, the minister will have a certain right to recall products. That is it.
J'ai 2 pages d'explication.
I have 2 pages explaining it, but I'll stop there.
Mr. Nakvi and then Mr. Julian.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just obviously trying to understand the technical implications of this amendment. And perhaps I can go back to either Mr. Lee or Ms. Goddard, whoever is the appropriate person, who can explain to us what did the original clause meant that's in the bill as tabled, and what's the difference with the change that's being presented or moved by Mr. Theriault. No, this is the committee where we do the work. Welcome.
This is, Mr. Nakvi is entitled to put their opinions on the record. It is relevant and pertinent to the discussions. Go ahead, Mr. Lee, please. Mr. Lee has the floor.
Could I just clarify, Mr. Chair? The question is, because we're on 1.1, and you want an explanation of how this has changed? Because this seems to, again, add in the ability to recall, clearly, but also it adds in certain environmental measures, so getting information, being able to change a label, contrasted with changing a label for human health. That is of concern, but certainly the intent to make sure environmental changes can come up, recalls can take place both for human health and environment, it's clear there. Also making sure that regulations can be made underneath those, I think that part of the text is clear. But I think the absence of the label change power, for example, although including it for environmental measures, we were just trying to understand that inclusion.
That's helpful.
Thank you. Mr. Julian and then Mr. Theriault.
Très brièvement, Monsieur le Président, comme j'ai expliqué.
Thank you, Chair. As I explained last week, we support the idea that Health Canada should continue having the capacity to impose voluntary recalls in the rare cases where a company doesn't want to comply with health and safety requirements. The industry has a good file in this regard. We know that, but occasionally and very rarely so, they should have that ability, and that is why I said last week that I support this amendment presented by the bloc, BQ2. Mr. Terry, please. For the benefit of Mr. Nakvi, I will now read my 2 pages. I thought I would go fast. The recall right to the minister is the one in the Act in clause 21.3 in point 3, page 16 of the Act. We can read 23.31. If there is any imminent or serious danger to health, the minister may order the person selling it to recall it or to have it sent to a specific place or to do these 2 things at the same time. This recall comes in 21.32 with coercive measures and the possibility to prohibit the sale in 23.33, page 17 of the Act. The recall also includes recall in case of any serious danger to the environment, 21, page 17 of the Act, as well as any associated prerogatives, the possibility of changing the label in any case of serious danger to the environment. Clause 21.2, which is not included there, and which is something Mr. Nakvi may be interested in, is not included in the recall. And this concerns the requirement to change the label in case there is any serious danger to health. The minister may impose a change of the label without applying the Act. We find that in clause 16 and 17 of the Act, page 13, on the Act for Health, Natural Health Products. As I said before, we maintain the right of recall, but this right of recall is based on part of the current Act, but particularly something we always forget, there are regulations that exist that guide practices in this sector. Therefore, it is very clear with sections 16 and 17 of the regulations, page 13, there are 2 scenarios, 2 possible scenarios. Even without the Act intervening at all, if the product label is not compliant, Health Canada could apply measures and use powers like seizure, stopping sales, canceling the license, and so on. If the label is compliant, but Health Canada would like the company to change it for safety reasons, Health Canada could require that the company go carry out the change or abandon the product. If the company is not compliant, Health Canada could stop the sale of this product or suspend the license by virtue of the current regulations in clause 16. And Health Canada could ask a company to change its labeling, including adding new warnings if the minister has reasonable grounds to think that a natural health product is no longer safe for use. So I don't know what Mr. Navgi wants, except trying to disagree. I think that because of the work we're doing here, I think we are all looking for common sense here. That is what we need here, Mr. Chair.
Not just here.
Mr. Nakvi, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and trying to understand the depth and scope of this particular amendment and having a clear view of it. I do want to move sub-amendment to this motion, which will read as follows. And again,
Point of order.
It has been
From Ms. Goodrich.
It has become very clear that clearly, the Liberals decided to have a whole bunch of sub-amendments to the amendments that we've had in place for a while. While we do have requirements to have them into the clerk, I think it is absolutely insane that we do not have these sub-amendments before we are getting here, so that we can actually have some planning before we come into this meeting. Like, I get that they've decided that they're going to play this like game here, but this is leaving all of us that actually want to be able to provide good work for Canadians in the dark. And we still don't have the sub-amendment text. If it was clear that he was going to be moving a sub-amendment, why didn't we have this earlier?
Sub-amendments can't be moved until an amendment is moved, and the amendment has been moved, and now the sub-amendment has been moved. It is in order. There's no violation of the rules. Go ahead and present your sub-amendment, Mr. Naqvi.
Thank you. And if Ms. Goodrich would have allowed me to finish my sentence, was just saying that it's with the clerk in both English and French, and I'm sure it's being circulated as I am reading this sub-amendment, which reads as follows. 1.1, the Act is amended by adding the following after Section 2.2. 2.21, despite the definition therapeutic product in Section 2, A, Sections 21.2 to 21.303 and 30.01, and paragraph 30, subsection 1.2, clause F, apply to a natural health product within the meaning of the Natural Health Products Regulations. B, despite sections 31.2 and 31.4, section 31.1 applies to any contravention of an order made under sections 21.2 to 21.303 or 30.01 with respect to a natural health product within the meaning of the Natural Health Products Regulations, as if it was a contravention relating to food. C, where the minister has made an order under subsection 21.3 sub 1 to recall a natural health product within the meaning of the Natural Health Products Regulations. I, section 21.5 applies in respect of any actual or potential contravention of subsection 21.3 sub 3 with respect to the natural health
Point
product.
of order.
Rappel au règlement, Monsieur le Président. Rappel au règlement.
Point of order, Chair. Mr. Theriault. Mr. Naqvi is reading very fast. I think he's simply disrespecting me. He's disrespecting the interpreters. These people are obliged to translate what he's saying. Well, the interpreter is doing the best he can. The interpreters do the best they can, but it's not possible to understand what he's doing. He should send it in writing. Mr. Chair, I find this insulting, what is happening now. I thought Mr. Naqvi was a gentleman, but I think he's playing political games now. But when he's lecturing conservatives all the time, well, Mr. Chair, this is a parliament. On the other side, you find yourself in the opposition, and the next day you find yourself in government, and you act like the other ones. I feel deeply insulted by the unparliamentary behavior of Mr. Naqvi, who is the parliamentary secretary of the minister. Mr. Theriault, I have no intention of defending Mr. Naqvi, but I must inform you, Mr. Chair, I'm requesting that he table his amendment in writing as fast as possible. Mr. Theriault, I have a point of order that I'm responding to, and then I'll give you the floor.
So I guess knowing that you cannot have the sub-amendments before an amendment is moved, could we ask that someone of the many Liberal staffers that are sitting in the back perhaps go and print copies of every single sub-amendment you plan on moving, so that when it is moved, we can have it in front of us so that we can actually be dealing with this, and the interpreters can have it so that everyone can understand the conversation that's happening in real time. I don't think this is unreasonable to ask for.
Sub-amendment has been circulated. Does the meeting require a suspension in order to have a look at it before we resume?
It's very substantive, Mr. Chair.
No, I don't. Do we want a suspension to have a look at it?
Yes.
Okay, the meeting's suspended. And give the floor back to Mr. Naqvi to finish presenting his sub-amendment, please.
Sorry, repeat that again, Chair.
You have the floor.
Yeah.
And are you finished presenting your sub-amendment? If so, you can cede the floor and we'll go to the next person on the list.
No, I just wasn't finished reading it, so let me just finish doing this. And I want to apologize to Mr. Theriault that my intent was not to insult him or our interpreters. If I was reading too fast, my apologies. It was not by design or intention. So just the last part, so that is on the record, is II2, despite sections 31.2 and 31.4, section 31.1 applies to any contravention of subsection 21.3 sub 3 or of a regulation made under paragraph 31.2F with respect to the natural health product as if it was a contravention relating to food. Chair, that's the sub-amendment. If I may speak to it now. We have some concerns with the amendment that Mr. Theriault has presented. The amendment would revoke all Vanessa's law authorities for NHPs to manage serious health and safety risks, with the exception of the minister's ability to order a recall. Other authorities, including the supplementary rules authority that would allow Health Canada to take action on pseudoephedrine, would be revoked. So, for example, it would allow the minister to direct a label change if an NHP is deemed to pose a serious risk to the environment, but not to direct a label change if an NHP poses a serious risk to human health. That clearly does not make any sense. While we all agree the ability to order a recall is an important tool, this amendment would not extend to other measures that can be used to address serious issues, such as the ability to apply to a court to impose an injunction or direct label or packaging changes when serious risks are identified. The injunction authority, in particular, is a critical power to deal proactively with cases of non-compliance, allowing the courts to direct a person to stop an action that contravenes the act. Chair, in addition, the effectiveness of the recall power relies on having an appropriate fines and penalties regime to ensure compliance. We have heard from Health Canada officials that $5,000 is too low. For some large businesses, this is just the cost of doing business. While we understand that concerns that the maximum fine for therapeutic products is too high for NHPs, we are proposing to apply the maximum fine for food products to NHPs. So this strikes a balance between a meaningful fines and penalties regime while recognizing that NHPs are distinct from prescription products. I also want to emphasize that we think it's important for Parliament to determine appropriate fines and penalties rather than have the Governor in Council determine this without parliamentary oversight. I would hope that all my colleagues would agree with that principle. The sub-amendment that I have proposed would preserve the most essential authorities needed by the minister to protect health and safety in the most serious circumstances. This includes the authority for the minister to direct a label or package change, which is in section 21.2, the authority for a court to impose injunctions, which is in section 21.5 in relation to a recall, and the authorities that have been recently used to strictly regulate nicotine replacement therapies, which is contained in section 30.01. We firmly believe that these authorities are essential to address serious health and safety issues when they emerge. This sub-amendment would also preserve tougher fines and penalties for contraventions of a recall or supplementary rules order. It proposes to use the fines and penalties named under sections 31.1, the penalties used for food, not therapeutic products, as I mentioned a moment ago. It also includes the authority for a court to issue injunctions with respect to a contravention of a recall order. Fines and penalties for all other contravention of regulatory requirements would return to the lower levels prior to Vanessa's law. Finally, Chair, the sub-amendment that I proposed to BQ2 is also to achieve the intent of BQ3. We have added a provision that sets out what offense provisions apply to a contravention of the recall order, and a reference is added to the regulation making power for recall in subsection 31.2F so that it applies to NHPs. I wanted to present that to you and have that on the record. I recognize that the sub-amendment has a lot of provisions, but it is very much in keeping with what's presented by Mr. Theriault, just ensuring that it covers the breadth and scope of the authorities that are given to the minister as it relates to nicotine replacement therapies, the amendment that we just made earlier and approved through this. So that's the extent of it. So I'll stop here, Chair. I do have some questions for the experts as well to sort of help understand, for the benefit of all members, the intent behind this sub-amendment. So if you're okay with that, I can pose those questions to the experts as well.
Okay, you can pose the questions to the experts while you have the floor. If you want somebody else to intervene and then pose questions, just get back on the list, or you can do it now. That's up to you.
I'd rather do it now. It's fresh in folks' minds. So let me just start with question number one. Again, I guess I'll go to Mr. Lee. He seems to be answering questions, or Ms. Goddard, whoever is capable. I don't want to presuppose. So we've heard from colleagues that Health Canada wouldn't need the supplementary rules provision to take action on pseudoephedrine, pardon my pronunciation, which is a precursor to the production of meth. Can you explain what makes pseudoephedrine different from other precursors and why other legislation couldn't be used in this particular case?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So it is correct that when it's just used as a precursor, ephedrine and pseudoephedrine is regulated in a different framework as a controlled product. But because here it's a health product, so it's approved for a therapeutic use, so decongestion, and it's then used by organized crime, dismantled, and made into the methamphetamine. So because it's sitting under the Food and Drugs Act, we needed to find a way to make sure that it didn't go out in an uncontrolled way to those that wanted to use it for, again, lethal purposes. So that's really the difference. It's not a straight precursor. It's actually a health product that can be repurposed, and that's why we needed to deal with it specially. And so having the supplementary measures would be very important to keep it behind the counter or in front of the counter, just to make sure that organized crime, for example, cannot get it and repurpose it.
Thank you. So very specific purpose as to why this change is necessary. My second question to you, Mr. Lee, is can you explain further that when injunction power could be used and why it's important?
Chair, an injunction power is a very important enforcement tool. It can, if you're prosecuting, it can take a very long time. In the case of something like a recall, if a company is not obeying the recall, it's something that's very important to go to the court and get them to reinforce the fact that you really need to follow this order. So you can do that in a very brief way. You can also make sure that, again, if there's ongoing contravention, the court can then supervise the situation. So it's a way, it's another tool of enforcement. Again, it goes to the courts, they adjudicate it, but it can be a very rapid measure, keeping in mind that recalls are really where there's an imminent threat to human safety.
Which is, again, court, you have to apply to the court to get an injunction if somebody fails to follow the recall order that has been issued. My last question to you, Mr. Lee, is can you also explain further why the power to direct a label change when health risks are identified is important?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, just as a clarification, the reason the label change power was included in the Act for therapeutic products in the first place was to make sure that we didn't have to intervene by seizing a product or removing its license. Actually, that's not in the best interests often of patients or consumers. Because that's, again, they don't get the product, and at that point, just over a labeling issue. And so having a label change power that's really geared, and it's very important, that the threshold is you do it to prevent an injury, and only then. So it's really making sure that you can instruct that through an order to have it become, again, a safe labeling. In terms of the regulations, they don't have the power to instruct a change in label. There are rules about complying with the label expectations, but if there's something dangerous on the label, then basically the idea of the order would be to mandate that change without disrupting supply. It gives the company a chance to relabel and make sure that you're not taking the product away from Canadians. So that's really the idea of a label change power. And again, it's reserved only for those times when there's a potential injury that we have to intervene in.
That's it from
Mr.
me. Thank you.
Naqvi. Dr. Ellis, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. You know, I guess in spite of the fact that Mr. Naqvi has an entire department at his disposal, it's clear that he didn't consider this beforehand. And you know, that's a sad state of affairs. This is a substantive amendment, and no disrespect to you, Mr. Lee, but this certainly does not give anybody on this side of the table any chance to really consider and to look at the Act and understand how it may apply. You expect us to make this decision on the fly. Mr. Naqvi, as the rest of us did, had the ability to put forward any amendments that he wanted to, and obviously now at the 11th hour chooses to make a substantive sub-amendment to a very straightforward BQ2. That being said, I think there's a couple of things to consider. If this bill went back to the House unamended, none of these powers would actually exist at all. And I think the other ridiculous thing that we fail to consider here is that there is no substantiation that recall powers need to be extended at all. Nobody has provided one shred of evidence. In fact, we've asked for it. Sadly, the NDP Liberal coalition had voted against a common sense conservative motion to compel people who talked about serious adverse events to bring them forward. Then we wouldn't even have to have Mr. Julian's motion. We wouldn't even have to talk about it because we would have had evidence to consider, which once again he voted against in his lack of support to the natural health product industry, Chair.
Point of order.
That being said,
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Point of
that's what you did.
That is complete disinformation. I move the UC that actually compels that information.
Well, when you get the floor, you'll be able to address that, but it's not appropriate to do it through a point of order. Go ahead, Dr. Ellis.
Well, thanks very much, Chair. Again, as you know, we have an experienced parliamentarian who clearly doesn't know the rules. That being said, he did vote against the Conservative motion to require those people who made disparaging remarks to provide that information to this committee, which again, didn't happen. That being said, I think the other thing for folks around this table to consider is, again, what's the evidence to say that ephedrine or pseudoephedrine are a significant problem inside the NHP industry and that we need this regulation? Does anybody have any evidence? Mr. Naqvi have any evidence? I see that there is no evidence to say that this is necessary. And I guess I would like to ask the experts here from the department to say, are ephedrine and pseudoephedrine being addressed anywhere else by this government? And if so, where? And what is the likelihood of this, once again, substantive sub-amendment foisted upon the committee playing a significant role in the illegal trade and traffic of ephedrine and pseudoephedrine?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So there is presently in place an interim order addressing ephedrine and pseudoephedrine. It basically requires the intervention of a pharmacist to be able to access it. This is for reasons that we don't want it out being made into methamphetamine. So there is a legal operation there. It's being made under the interim order power, which only lasts for a year. And the departmental intent or hope is to be able to move this over to the supplementary rules. So you really land it in a spot where we can deal with the issue.
Thanks very much, and through you, Chair, what you're telling me is, and the requirement for ephedrine and pseudoephedrine to be held behind the counter in pharmacies is not something new. This has been going on for some time now, and I see your concurrence on that. That being said, why would we muddy the waters inside the natural health products legislation that we have before us that we know is important to 80% of Canadians, so Health Canada or the clueless Minister of Health can introduce legislation because he can't figure out how to do it any other way? Is that the answer to the question?
Mr. Chair, I think the departmental intent always was to mitigate the safety risk. That's why they, after the body that makes suggestions for behind the counter or not, stepped away from the issue. In fact, they made a ruling that they would not deal with natural health products anymore. The department intervened to make sure, again, that we're protecting against the manufacture of methamphetamine. And so there's a law there now. It's sitting on the books. It's operating. It's functioning quite well, in fact. And the only idea here is that we'd like to remake it. Again, the department would like to remake it to make sure that protection subsists and it stays, making sure that the product doesn't go astray into organized crime.
Thank you very much. And through you, Chair, are you telling me that there is no other legislation besides this legislation that the Department of Health could have found to protect Canadians from using ephedrine and pseudoephedrine to create methamphetamine? That's question number one. So put that in your back pocket. Number two is related to, please enlighten the committee as to how many instances inside the NHP industry have there been difficulties with ephedrine and pseudoephedrine, specifically in its use to create meth or crystal meth?
So the first question, Mr. Chair, is basically that it is a health product and it's under the Food and Drugs Act, and then under that, the Natural Health Product Regulations. So because it's there, we needed to find a way to allow it still to be sold as a natural health product. You don't want to, one way to do it is to remove it from the market and put it in a controlled scheme. We want it to still be presented to the market so people can use it, but then not abused. So the control is really on making sure it's not sold in large quantities to those that want to abuse it. That's really the mechanism. And I would refer you to the rationale given to the public in making the interim order. It had the evidence. It had discussions. We had discussions with enforcement, law enforcement, to make sure who were in favor of this, to make sure that we controlled the behavior. It's pretty egregious to have the methamphetamine out there, and so really that was the intent.
Thanks very much, sir. I appreciate that. And through you, Chair, one more time, because I didn't know this was coming, how could I possibly prepare and read the egregious reports to which you refer? I'll ask you one more time. How many times have natural health product manufacturers or distributors been implicated in using ephedrine or pseudoephedrine in the creation of methamphetamines?
So, Mr. Chair, it's not the industry. The industry makes their product, their health product. After that, it leaves them. It's out on retail shelves, so it's beyond their control at that point. And so it's really not the companies doing the repurposing. That's not really their business model. It's the organized crime goes and buys a quantity and then repurposes it in their labs.
I understand that, Mr. Lee, and I guess what you're suggesting, excuse me, is that somebody could make a significant purchase of bulk amounts of natural health products containing ephedrine or pseudoephedrine and use them for nefarious purposes. My question to you, to the best of your knowledge, has that ever happened?
Yes, law enforcement has raised that as a concern, that it is being repurposed. Yeah.
Sorry, they raise it as a concern, I understand that, but has it happened? And if so, yes. Please tell us, enlighten us. When did it last happen?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't have that detail, but again, it was a foundation for making the interim order. We did consult with the provinces, we consulted with law enforcement and the sector, actually. There is support generally to make sure that, again, the product can be sold on the market as a natural health product. It's very useful for that. But it's also then not abused and you can't buy it in large quantities. So again, the foundation is in that order.
I understand that part, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. I do understand what the concern is. My question to you is, has this actually happened, or is it a theoretical concern?
It was not based on a theoretical concern.
So I guess, once again, here we are. We've been down this road with respect to natural health products many times, and sir, this is not directed to be specifically negative towards you, but what we hear is these thinly veiled ideas that say, yes, this has happened, and not one person has been able to give specific evidence or table it with this committee, nor has there been a desire, sadly, amongst the other members of this committee to have that information tabled to be considered. And I think that's irresponsible of everybody who's raised a concern here. We've heard another group that said we have 700 adverse events. And one of the adverse events they named is somebody read a label wrong and they were dissatisfied with the product they have. Now, is that an adverse event? I don't think. Now, again, as I've said previously, 13,000 Canadians, seniors every year, are hospitalized because of prescription products. Now, does that mean they're bad? No. Does that mean we need to gut the regulation related to prescription drugs? I don't think so, but it might. Now, here we are again. We're left with somebody saying, I think there's been a report, or maybe there has been, and I don't know what the report is. Nobody's showing it to me. And, do you have it with you? Can you bring it up on your phone and can you distribute it to the committee? If you have those things, I think that's appropriate here. Because once again, Mr. Naqvi, with his lack of preparedness, has foisted upon the committee a substantive amendment, which might be important for the safety of Canadians, and it might not be. How could we possibly be expected to make a decision when, if this is that an important an amendment, once again, Mr. Naqvi should have done his homework, and he should have submitted an amendment like the rest of everybody around this table did. So what do we have once again? Oh, this is a sub-amendment. And Chair, I guess the other thing that I think I would ask you to consider is, if this is that substantive an amendment that changes the original intent of the amendment, it's a sub-amendment, then is it really admissible? And I think that that's a very significant thing to consider here, because we do not have any evidence provided to the committee to make an appropriate decision with respect to pseudoephedrine. And I think the difficulty here as good legislators sitting around the table, and especially in the fact that we're in the midst of a study on drugs and drug use inside this country here at Health Committee, we understand the difficulties associated therein. Certainly, you want to be cautious. I understand that. We can't reduce the risk to zero. The difficulty here, though, is again, we have a substantive amendment that's unsubstantiated. I think the other part that we need to understand clearly is if this amendment fails to pass, do you have the ability under the Food and Drug Act to make amendments outside of this particular bill, Bill 368? Is there ability to make amendments outside of Bill 368 to protect Canadians from the potential diversion of ephedrine or pseudoephedrine, whether it be from prescription, non-prescription, over-the-counter, or natural health products? Do you have that ability, yes or no? And feel free, you don't have to answer yes or no. You can expand if you so desire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, if the hypothetical is if we did not have the supplementary rules order in play, would we be able to address the ephedrine, pseudoephedrine, and potentially other substances? The answer is not in the way we have in the interim order. We could try to make the interim order again. But again, that lasts a year. It really is reserved for situations of, very high level emergency. Here we thought it was justified. But again, it really is important to find a stable solution for this. And that really was the most fitting from an instrument point of view.
Sorry, so through you, Chair, what you're telling this committee is if Bill 368 brought forward by my colleague didn't exist, there's no other way for your department to address pseudoephedrine or ephedrine getting into the wrong hands? Is that what you're telling me? I'm sorry, I don't believe that, but if that's what you're telling me, that's what you're telling me.
I'm not sure that that's what
Thank
I
you, Blaine.
said, Mr. Chair. I think what we did was we tried to create the best solution we could. So again, the natural health product could be out there on the shelves. We're not interfering with it as a legitimate product. We didn't want to do that. But all the rule does is it's quite simple. It just says make sure that somebody doesn't show up basically and buy a whole crate of it and walk off when again it's not for personal use.
Mr. Lee, again, I'll interrupt you. We understand that portion of it. My point is this. If Bill 368 did not exist, and sorry, you've known that Bill 368 has existed for some time, and I'm supposed to believe today that a substantive amendment brought forward by Mr. Naqvi with respect to this very specific but important problem would not have been able to be addressed anywhere else. And I'm also supposed to believe that he thought this up between Tuesday and today, and that it shouldn't have been brought forward as an amendment on its own. Is that what I'm supposed to believe? Because I don't believe it.
So, Mr. Chair, again, to be precise, I don't think I was conclusive at all on not being able to do it another way. I think the deliberation was, and again, the supplementary rules order works against an unintended use. So we approve with an intended use. This is an abuse that goes beyond that. It was an instrument specially created for that. It also works for the nicotine replacement products. The theme of each of these products is really that it's being used in a way or presented in a way that's not the intended use. So that was the departmental thinking, that was the best way to solve it. It doesn't say that there's not another way, but that was the best way to solve it.
So again, just for clarity, is there another way besides interfering with the passage of Bill 368 that the department could deal with the issue of unintended diversion of ephedrine or pseudoephedrine from prescription, over-the-counter, or natural health product sources?
It's something I couldn't conclude right now, Mr. Chair. It's something we would have to examine, what alternate ways. Again, because the way we did do it is both through an interim order, which has limitations, but then also with the supplemental rules. Alternate ways would need to be examined. Again, making an instrument takes a lot of just deliberation, even if it's a governor and council proposal.
So through you, Chair, though, what you just said was basically, for the benefit of Canadians, changing the rules is very difficult.
Mr. Chair, I think what I'm trying to indicate is that the production of methamphetamine is a very important problem for the department and Canadians. We put a tool in place. It mitigates that risk. But the other benefit is it allows the natural health product to still be sold. And so it's a very well-tailored instrument to use. That's really the departmental thinking, and the supplemental rules set up actually allows for that balance between availability still and making sure that that abuse doesn't occur. That's really what I think the intention is of the instrument.
So if you continued down the same road in which the department is on at the current time and renewed the supplemental rules that you have, that's also a possibility. Is it true?
As a legislative proposal, once again, is that what you're
Yes.
saying?
Yes.
That would be the will of Parliament.
But if this particular sub-amendment, which again is substantive, were defeated here, there's no reason that the will of Parliament could not be used to renew the supplemental rules to which you've already alluded.
I think, Mr. Chair, that's beyond me to answer. I'm an official with technical advice that goes into parliamentary opportunity and procedure.
So it's really the will of Parliament to do that, but absolutely it could be done.
If you're talking about placing something in the Food and Drugs Act, yes, that's the process.
Yeah. Again, I think what we've heard from Mr. Lee is that these changes are difficult. Obviously, this NDP Liberal government has not made these changes for some reason, and again, have waited till the 11th hour to attempt to sub-amend an amendment inside a bill, which is not their own, to regulate problems that they can't see fit to regulate themselves out of, which I find absolutely difficult to believe. So, and again, Chair, I would suggest to you that this is a substantive amendment because of the fact that an entire department can't see its way to regulate out of this, and it would take some time. It would take an act of Parliament, and here in this committee, we are expected to accept a sub-amendment as not being substantive, deliberate on it without any prior warning, and then make a decision which an entire government department cannot make in several years. I think that is, if that's not the definition of a substantive amendment or a sub-amendment, I don't know what is. I'll leave it at that.
Ms. Goodrich, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just really quickly, I'm very concerned about the use of ephedrine when it comes to a chemical precursor. It devastates communities, and I've seen it right across my riding and in rural communities across the country. And I actually think that this actually triggers some conversations or some thought bubbles in my head of something that we actually haven't studied as we've been looking at our study on the addiction crisis here at our health committee, that we probably do need to actually have more looked at of these chemical precursors, because what I'm hearing is that we don't have the tools at our disposal. So we're looking at potentially adding one possible tool to deal with one substance, but I don't think that that's actually enough to deal with the chemical precursors when it comes to fentanyl or other things. And we need to be doing everything we possibly can if we actually want to make steps in the right direction on the addiction crisis. But the part that I really have a frustration with is that we're being, and Mr. Lee, I have no reason to doubt your sincerity in bringing this information forward. But what I do question is we haven't heard this as a concern up until this point. Mr. Naqvi has known that this bill has been before this committee for a long time, and he chose not to bring forward any amendments and then decided to instead sub-amend when he realized that maybe this was going to be a problem. But it didn't give us any opportunity to consult with any witnesses to see if this does what you guys say it does. And so while I would like to just trust you, I don't. Canadians don't trust this government, especially when it comes to the natural health food products. And we heard that very clearly. I know we've had thousands of phone calls or thousands of emails into my office, hundreds of phone calls, and this is something that is too serious to just trust in the 11th hour that a very large substantive amendment is going to cover it. And so for that reason, I have to vote against it.
Mr. Nakvi, and then Mr. Calkins.
Thank you.
No, excusez-moi, Mr. Thériault.
I'm sorry, Mr. Theriault. Before Mr. Nakvi. I'm sorry, you have the floor, Mr. Theriault. Thank you, Chair. I'll try to be quick. It appears to me that the matter of precursors could be resolved through regulations on precursors and by the Act on substances. And here, suddenly, as the minister did, to counter the dynamic of the bill, knowing very well that we are now working in this committee on overdose and so on. Well, I don't believe that Health Canada, if it does its job well, could not propose under another legislative framework that I've just mentioned another way of dealing with this problem. And it doesn't deal with the problem we are discussing here. And this sub-amendment is not admissible because it's a substantive amendment. It's not a light amendment on the form, considering all the explanations that have been provided. So we can deal with this problem in other ways. So unfortunately, I would like us to vote, Mr. Chair. I know Mr. Nakvi could speak for long if he wills, but I think this problem could be resolved otherwise. It should have been resolved upstream, and it should not prevent us from moving forward. We cannot introduce in an amendment all the concerns that we have, and the sub-amendment is not even very clear up till now, claiming that there's a dimension that the Act doesn't currently cover, but that dimension is covered by other regulations on precursors, the Act regulating drugs and other substances. And that Act clearly says that any substance that can be used to produce drugs is targeted by that Act. So if there's something missing in that Act, there should be a modification of the Act. Right now, there's an interim order dealing with the problem, from what I understand, and it could be renewed. So that interim order should be renewed to resolve the problem so that we can go ahead with our Act and focus on what it is focusing on. So the government could change the necessary rules and regulations. So, Mr. Chair, I would like to encourage Mr. Nakvi to change his amendment, or rather, to simply withdraw his amendment.
Merci, Mr. Thériault.
Thank you, Mr. Theriault.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'm not going to take too long. I have no intent of belaboring this debate, but I think there's a few important issues that came up they're important to address. I think what I've been hearing clearly from the officials is that we cannot use other laws on precursors, since this is a health product. And in other cases, we would then have to take the product off the shelves and regulate as a controlled substance. This problem in the current context doesn't exist because we have Vanessa's law. This gap only comes into play because of the bill that Mr. Calkin has presented. Otherwise, there was no issue, because we do have a law on the books that gives Health Canada the appropriate authority to deal with this matter. But now we find ourselves at a juncture with the amendments that are being suggested by Mr. Thériault that creates that gap, and the purpose behind The sub-amendments that I have proposed is to narrow that gap so that we don't run into it, right? Like this is a remedial step that I'm taking. I'd rather not have Bill 368, as we've stated before, because we think it's a bad law because it creates precisely the kind of issues that we're trying to address now by way of a Band-Aid mechanism. Now, Mr. Ellis loves to throw insults left and center to all his colleagues without any parliamentary respect, and he's entitled to do whatever, and he'll be judged by him or his loved ones on the manner he which treats. I won't go stoop to this level, but he often talks about lack of preparation. Perhaps he should have done his homework as well. The interim order that he says is not available is on Health Canada's website. He can find it. He can read it. It's got lots of footnotes. I've read it, but no. And so I don't know why he did not do his homework, but I leave it up to him as to how he manages his time. But, for example, when I read, and I'll just put this on the record, in the interim order it says that the Canadian law enforcement agencies have brought to Health Canada's attention that they have found single-ingredient ephedrine, NHPs in particular, authorized 8 milligram ephedrine formulations in clandestine laboratories that manufacture methamphetamine, pardon my pronunciation. That information is available. So to Mr. Thériault, I'm not trying to be cute and a half here or trying to do a run-in. I'm merely trying to strengthen his sub-amendment. If, for example, if Mr. Julian had not withdrawn his amendment, NDP 1, this problem did not exist because that had actually managed that particular gap. Now that is gone. That's why I'm forced to present this sub-amendment for consideration so that we can further bolster, strengthen Mr. Thériault's
Mr. Chair,
amendment.
point of order.
Point of order for Mr. Julian, please.
Mr. Naqvi is an experienced parliamentarian. He knows what the resolution, the amendment deadline was, and he knows he could have submitted that amendment at any time.
That's not a point of order. Please, Mr. Julian, you go ahead, Mr. Naqvi.
Well, I'm presenting a sub-amendment to amendment once it's tabled. And my spirit is simply that, and I think we've heard from the officials, that we are not taking away from Mr. Thériault's amendment. It makes it better. It strengthens it. There are few gaps that arise as a result of that amendment. And what my sub-amendment is doing is to eliminate those gaps so that the true intent of his amendment, if passed, can actually be take appropriate force. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Naqvi. Next on la prochaine personne sur la liste, c'est Monsieur Thériault.
The next person on the list is Mr. Thériault, but we are going to have a problem with resources supporting us here till 6:22. We can only have resources till 6:22. You have the floor. I have still not received the sub-amendment in writing. I want it in writing. I have not received it. I don't understand why we don't have it, why we're discussing it. It's been a long time that we made that request. Why have we not received the sub-amendment in writing?
C'était envoyé par courriel.
It was sent by email at 5:01 p.m. It may be a good idea when you send something by email during deliberations, please let us know that it has been sent. That's the least we can ask. I asked for a paper version. That's a request I make all the time. We use paper versions. I don't want to delay things, but I think we could have had time to print everything we needed since we started this discussion. That makes things easy. because looking at various screens at the same time, looking at various telephones at the same time, that is not how we should be working. Let's be more stringent, please.
OK. On est en train de...
We are finding a paper version for you. We will suspend briefly. Can we suspend or should we continue? Let's suspend. I'll have my comments when I receive the paper version.
Meeting is suspended. To order, Mr. Thériault, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. After reading the document, I realized that we are going backwards in light of our previous discussions. Mr. Julian withdrew his amendment, so I'll simply be voting against. That's all. So we can vote.
Thank you, Chair. I've tried to understand the rationale provided by the mover of the sub-amendment, and I too am frustrated because this on the surface appears to be well thought out enough and substantive enough that it should have been in the original package of amendments, not as a sub-amendment. I don't know, Mr. Chair, Mr. Ellis did, I think, intimate whether or not the sub-amendment is actually in order because of it substantially changes the nature of the original amendment, but I don't know if you have decided, Mr. Chair, that the amendment is in order, but I find it passing strange that the rationale and the justification for doing this is somehow to help law enforcement, which usually relies on things like the Criminal Code and the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act in order to do their jobs. And given the fact that there is a renewable interim order in place to already deal with these precursors, I think this is another attempt to play politics with the industry, and I don't think that it's going to, I don't think that this is the right place to be dealing with precursors for drugs. It should be the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act and the Criminal Code. You're asking natural health product industry and the consumers of those natural health products to take on the responsibility of preventing organized crime. That's the responsibility of police, law enforcement agencies. It's the responsibility of the government to make sure that adequate provisions are in place in the Controlled Drugs and Substance Act, because this is criminal. We're talking about criminal behavior here. And in the Criminal Code of Canada. And for those reasons, Mr. Chair, I believe that this, it may be disguised as a well-intentioned effort, but I think it's missed its mark insofar as where it needs to be addressed, and I'll be voting against the sub-amendment.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Calkins. Speakers list is now exhausted. Are we ready for the question? Is it the will of the committee to adopt the sub-amendment proposed by Mr. Naqvi? All those in favor of adoption of the sub-amendment, hands please. All those opposed? The sub-amendment is therefore defeated. That brings us to BQ2 as presented. Are there any interventions with respect to BQ2? Seeing none, is it the will of the committee to adopt BQ2 as presented? Hands, please. All those in favor of BQ2 as presented? Opposed? BQ2 is carried. And BQ2 is the last amendment on Clause 2. So the question, so I therefore call Clause 2. Is it the will of the committee to adopt Clause 2 as amended? Okay. All those in favor, hands. Opposed?
Oh, no.
Sorry?
Clause 2 wasn't amended.
Oh, excuse me, Clause 2 was not amended, so that was, what BQ2 did was it created a new Clause 1.1. So we are dealing with Clause 2 as presented in the bill without any amendments whatsoever. All those, are there any interventions with respect to Clause 2? Seeing none, shall Clause 2 carry? Hands, please. All those in favor of Clause 2? Opposed? Clause 2 is carried. That brings us to Clause 3. Any interventions with respect to Clause 3? Shall Clause 3 carry? Clause 3 is carried. That brings us to new Clause 3.1. There is an amendment in your package, NDP 2. Mr. Julian, do you wish to move NDP 2?
As I mentioned earlier, Mr. Chair, I withdraw NDP 2.
So, okay.
So it's okay. It wasn't moved.
Right, so it hasn't been moved, so we just go right to BQ3. Monsieur Thériault, voulez-vous présenter BQ3?
Oui. Alors,
that Bill 368 be amended by adding after line 13 on page 1 the following new clause. 3.1 subsection 30 1.2 of the Act is amended by adding the following after paragraph F, and that's on page 40 of the Act for those who want to follow. Respecting the recall of natural health products within the meaning of the Natural Health Products Regulations. For those who want to understand the sentence further, we are talking about page 40, and then we're going back to page 38 on regulations concerning therapeutic products without limiting the other powers given. The Governor of Council can adopt regulations concerning F01, respecting the recall of natural health products within the meaning of the Natural Health Products Regulations, and fines relating to natural health products within the meaning of the Natural Health Products Regulation, all of the regulations made under paragraph 0.1. So instead of immediately defining penalties, there will have to be a discussions between industry and Health Canada, and things will be done the right way. As we've said from the very beginning, we will have to determine penalties that are proportional to the offenses committed by industry. We've had long discussions, and we realized that the penalties were disproportionate, and that is why C368 came to light, amongst other things. So this allows us to introduce regulations, and in the meantime, Mr. Chair, the current regulations will apply, and that's the meaning of this section. Thank you, Mr. Terrio. Mr. McVeigh.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question for Mr. Lee in relations to this amendment. As I read it, and I think I alluded to my comments earlier as well, what this amendment is doing is that it gives the Governor and Council the authority to set fines as opposed to Parliament. And my preference would be that the Parliament should have the power to determine the quantum of the penalties, not the Governor and Council, or in other hands, the Cabinet, to do so. Is this out of the norm? Is this out of the ordinary as to what Mr. Terrio is suggesting? And from a regulatory perspective, what's your preference? From a regulatory perspective, what's the preference as to how the power should be outlined?
So, Mr. Chair, I mean, to answer the question, it is at least for the Food and Drugs Act, that this is not something we have seen before. We understand the intent is to make sure that there's a robust discussion and consultation in setting the fine. One technical observation, and this is very important, I think, to clarify, the word penalty doesn't occur in the Act. We actually have the words fine and we have the words term. So I don't know if this speaks to both, so that the Governor and Council, I guess the intention is to sort of set a fine level, but there are also terms of imprisonment on, and so penalty, it's just to clarify whether it means that both might be set by Governor and Council. In any case, it's a highly unusual inclusion. It is usually something that the Parliament does directly and doesn't delegate fine levels or prison terms. As an observation. And basically that process would take some time to make the regulation. So there's some ambiguity in the meantime. I suppose it would we would need to default back to the $5,000 level, which again, if there's a recall situation, getting compliance, that would be a very difficult level to deal with. But it is, yes, a very unusual delegation to the GIC. Again, our thought was there are lower fine levels in the Act to point to by section number other than the $5,000 level and not leave it to, again, that delegation down to Governor and Council.
Anything further, Mr. Naqvi?
That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Terrio, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Terrio, at F02, we talk about penalties by virtue of the regulations. So the government may act through regulation. So what exists now will remain in place until there's a new regulatory framework. And to get to regulations, we need consultations. No one has been consulted. Things were done in hiding with no transparency. When Bill C-47 was tabled, there was a 5 million fine. So far, there has been no demonstration of the fact that industry was that recalcitrant. The Auditor General demonstrated Health Canada's incapacity to carry out inspections. I imagine that they will be able to do so now following discussions about regulations, cost recovery, and so on. But right now, it's clear that this amendment will ensure consultations to make sure that we can arrive at appropriate regulations for natural health products. Of course, there is a need for stringency. Maybe the 5,000 is not sufficient, but we clearly see that in respect of a natural health product, within the meaning of the Natural Health Products Regulation, all of the regulations made under paragraph F01, so fines can be implemented, but those will be as covered by the current regulations for natural health products.
Interventions with respect to BQ3. Seeing none, shall BQ3 carry? All those in favor of the adoption of BQ3, please raise your hand. All those opposed? BQ3 is carried. Then we come to Clause 4, for which there have been no amendments filed. Is there any submissions with respect to Clause 4 of the bill? All those in favor of the adoption of Clause 4, or to put it another way, shall Clause 4 carry? All those in favor? Opposed? Clause 4 is carried. Brings us to the title. Shall the title carry?
Yes.
All those in favor, raise your hand. Those opposed? The title is carried. Shall the bill, as amended, carry? Yes. Hands, please. Shall the bill carry? Opposed? The bill is carried. Shall the chair report the bill as amended to the House? Those opposed? Okay, so the chair will be reporting the bill as amended to the House. Shall the committee order a reprint of the bill as amended for the use of the House at report stage? All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? Okay, the will of the committee is that a reprint be ordered. Is there any further business to come before the meeting? Oh, go ahead. I was going to say congratulations, Mr. Calkins. Dr. Ellis, you have something?
Move to adjourn, Chair. Yes, it is.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Well done, Blaine.
Yes, congratulations.